Okay guys, so now we're going to learn how to handle numbers that we multiply or divide that were measured numbers. So take a look at this. If you were to multiply 31.2 times 10 on your calculator, you would get this answer. You'd get 312. However, that has too many sig figs in it for your answer because you have 3 sig figs here. And how many in here? How many in 10? Only 1. Because that trailing 0 is not significant. When you multiply and divide measured numbers, unlike with adding and subtracting, you don't go with how many decimal places you have, you go with the least number of sig figs that you have. And since this number only has 1 sig fig in it, we can only have 1 sig fig in our answer. But how do you do that for a number like 312? Well, what that means is all the numbers except for the 3 have to become zeros, because those trailing zeros are not significant. So we're basically rounding 312 down to 300. And that may seem extreme to you, but what we're really saying is, hey, whatever measuring tool we used to get this 10 wasn't very good. We can't know more than this place for sure. So let's practice that idea. Remember, it's different than adding and subtracting. When you're adding and subtracting, you care about how many decimal places you have. When you're multiplying and dividing, it's how many sig figs you have. Okay, go ahead and do this one on your calculator. Pause and then come back and check to see if you rounded correctly. All right, so my calculator gives me this really long answer, 7.07641196, way too many sig figs. Each of my original numbers has 3, so my answer can have 3 sig figs. So that means I can go out to here, and I'm going to have to round this 7 to an 8. So my answer is going to be 7.08. Let's try another one. Okay, here's a tricky one. Calculate it out on the calculator and then round it, and then come back and see if you got the right answer. Here's the answer you get on your calculator, 0.007. So how many sig figs am I allowed to have in my answer? Well, this number has 2. This number has 1. Leading zeros are not significant. So my answer can only have 1, and it does, because the leading zeros in front of that 7 are also not significant. That's probably one of the trickiest cases, when you have those leading zeros and you tend to forget sometimes whether or not they are or are not significant. Let's try another one. Okay, do this one on your calculator and then round it and check to see if you got the right answer. On the calculator, you get 43.8. How many sig figs do we have in each of our numbers? This one has 3 sig figs. This one has 2. So my answer can have 2 sig figs, which means I'm rounding to 44. Okay, so it's pretty easy when you're doing multiplying and dividing on one worksheet and adding and subtracting on another, because you get in sort of a groove and you remember what you're doing. What's confusing is when you have both adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing together in the same place. My recommendation is that you get to the point where you're really good at doing one thing before you move on to the next thing. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you can always, without any mistakes, tell how many sig figs are in a particular number. Once you're good at that, move on to adding and subtracting and rounding to the right number of decimal places. Once you're sure you have that down, move on to multiplying and dividing and making sure you're able to round to the right number of sig figs. And then when you're feeling really confident, it's time to try mixed practice. Mixed practice is where you have to make sure that your brain recognizes, hey, what situation am I in? Am I multiplying or dividing, or am I adding and subtracting? And that's what the next tutorial will do. It'll give you mixed practice. Okay, see you there.